when we're talking to somebody else and that voice starts popping up and we start feeling that those emotions of social anxiety, we can treat that other person as our object of focus. We can become intensely curious and mesmerized by them. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of ShiShi Meditations, coming to you live from New York City. That's right. I'm finally back home. It feels amazing. Been traveling quite a bit, and yeah, I'm back. Got to hang out with some friends this weekend, which was awesome. And what I want to talk to you guys quickly today in this video about is social anxiety and how my current form of meditation practice is really helping me to deal with my social anxiety and deal with my tendency, which some of you might be able to relate to, of constantly kind of like looking back at myself while I'm having a conversation. This sort of like self-referential mindset of while you're talking to another person, you're constantly kind of like there's a part of your brain that's judging or observing how you're coming across and how that person is receiving you. And the reason this is on my mind is because yesterday, so I spent like 12 hours working yesterday. I was just like on my computer all day and didn't like talk to anyone. I was just like super dialed in, working on music and a bunch of other stuff. And then at night, because it was Saturday yesterday, so Saturday night I went to a party and at my friend's place, and then we all went out to a club. And so before we went, I showed up at this pregame, and I had just been like staring in front of a computer for 12 hours, like super just like antisocially, very disconnected. And, you know, I just kind of had this like aphasia where I was like, I walked outside and I was just like, okay, like time to get back into like being a human being again. I'm sure you guys can relate to that feeling after like a long day of work. And so I show up to this party and, you know, I walk in and I'm like kind of late, like everyone's already been there for a while and everyone's like in a great mood and people are drinking and having a good time. And I'm doing this thing this year where I'm not drinking for the entire year or doing any drugs. So basically, yeah, like I showed up sober with no, like, and I didn't have this like crutch to be able to like, oh, I feel awkward, like let me reach for a drink. I just kind of had to deal with it. And so yeah, that voice in my head that sort of pops up sometimes was very active last night. Like I walked in, even though a bunch of my friends were there, you know, there are some new people as well that I met, and like I definitely really noticed this voice of like, okay, like now gotta like time to be like a person again, and like gotta talk to this person and listen actively, and like I hope that make sure that they know that I'm listening, and all these kinds of like things that pop up in our head that, you know, we're trying to be present, but paradoxically all those thoughts take us out of the present moment, which is the irony of it. And it's harder for us to just essentially forget about ourselves. And I think that's why you know, people drink and do drugs and do all sorts of activities, or even healthy things like yoga or meditation. It's all kind of an attempt to deal with the heaviness of being a human being and having being the only organism on this earth with the ability to localize our awareness in the past or the future and turn it back inwards on ourselves. So like we're pretty much the only animal, or at least fully, who can fully be conscious of the fact that we're conscious. And I think that's really the root of all social anxiety, because you go into a social interaction and, you know, anxiety is fundamentally just the desire to control something that is out of your control. So anytime you have social anxiety, in my opinion, it's because you're trying to control someone's perception of you, or you're trying to essentially figure out like how they feel about you or control the way that you're coming across, because you want to present a certain image. And that's why when you're around people that you're really comfortable with, you don't feel any social anxiety. You know, when you're around your friends or lovers or your family, you tend to just be very comfortable being yourself, and that voice really quiets down, and in a way you kind of forget yourself. because there's no part of your brain that's concerned with how you're going to come across, because there's an implicit, deeper understanding that these people are going to accept you, or at least understand like who you really are. Contrast that to like a job interview, for example, or when you walk in and you're really like very seriously trying to control how you're coming across and making sure you're not saying the right thing. And that's why people get nervous in those situations. Or public speaking is another great example, where you could be talking to like 5,000 people and like trying to simultaneously control like how you're coming across to all of them. I mean, that's just like sensory overload to your brain, which is why so many people are afraid of public speaking. So the form of meditation that I've been practicing lately is a non-duality based meditation. And essentially, without getting like too crazily into it, if you guys are interested and want to check it out, check out this app called Waking Up. It's created by this neuroscientist by the name of Sam Harris. And he studied for like years in India and Tibet with all these like really famous like meditation teachers and Buddhist and Hindu gurus. But he's cool because he comes at it from a very secular scientific perspective. So I always kind of recommend him to my friends that aren't necessarily like super spiritual and can be kind of like skeptical about this kind of stuff. But anyway, so the app, I've just been doing his like daily meditations in this app called Waking Up. And there's a few different techniques, but essentially the idea is to become the observer of not only all the contents of your internal world, so like become the observer of all the thoughts that you feel, and become the observer of all of the physical sensations that you feel, and all of the emotions that you feel, but also then at a certain point to open your eyes, to stop retreating from the external world and let all that stimulation come in. You're meditating with your eyes closed, and then you open them, and suddenly this huge world of light and color and sound and taste and smell and feeling comes in, and now we're experiencing the world through our senses rather than just through the mind's eye, our ability to perceive or just think of random thoughts. And I think that's like the true test of meditation is, can you keep that observational ability in that test, and also in that situation, and also be able to recognize that all of those things that are happening are just essentially just things that are arising out of this fundamental space of awareness, this fundamental space of consciousness, which is essentially just your ability to notice things, your ability to notice your thoughts, your ability to notice other people. And then this is where it can be really helpful with social anxiety, knowing that you have this ability to notice all these things and you have the ability to cognize and perceive the world, reminding yourself that every other person on earth also has that ability. And that is something that we have in common with every other human being on earth, is the ability to be aware of ourselves, be aware of the fact that we are aware. And that's essentially what makes us the most evolved species on earth, is our ability to be conscious of our own consciousness. There's I think like a Zen saying, I don't know if it's a Zen saying, but it's essentially like, does a dog know that it's a dog? Does a cat know that it's a cat? We're the only animal that can become aware of ourselves in that full cohesive way. And once you kind of realize that, then when you're in an interaction with someone and that overactive voice starts piping up and saying, oh, how am I coming across? Is this person like me, or did I say the right thing, or are they losing interest in my like boring story or whatever it is? If you can realize that those are all just things that are occurring in this greater space of consciousness, and that other person that you're talking to also likely is having the same experience internally of, they're also probably feeling those same things and thinking those same thoughts. And what you always have in common with another person, no matter how separate you might feel physically or emotionally, or in terms of your mindsets and your opinions on things, is that shared fundamental space of consciousness, that ability to perceive and cognize your experience, both internally and externally. And I think like really feeling that and having that realization at a deep somatic level can really break down the walls between you and other people. It can really help you to realize that we're all in this experience together, and we're, you know, rather than being, even though we might be discretely separate as like different clumps of matter of like atoms, in a way, we're all just waves as part of the same ocean, because we're all just expressions of that same fundamental consciousness, that same ability to be aware of ourselves. And so, you know, if that sounded a little bit like woo-woo, one technique that I'll just leave you guys with is that can be really helpful and is like easy to apply is next time you're like in a situation where you're talking to somebody and that voice starts to come up where you're like, oh, how is this person like coming across to me? And am I like saying the right thing or whatever? Try to treat that social interaction as its own form of meditation. So if you guys have tried meditation, you might have experienced like a lot of meditation programs or apps or classes or teachers will tell you to focus on the breath. And then they'll say like, if you have a thought, then just bring your awareness back to the breath. Every time you get distracted, bring your awareness back to the breath. And in the same way, when we're talking to somebody else and that voice starts popping up and we start feeling that those emotions of social anxiety, we can treat that other person as our object of focus. We can become intensely curious and mesmerized by them and curious about them, and essentially use it as a way of meditating so that every time our mind goes off into other thoughts, which are likely going to be thoughts about ourselves and how we're coming across, we can just say, oh, no, back to this person, back to you, back to you. And like anything else, it's just a skill that when you practice, you get better and better at it. And I know that fundamentally, like the main reason I did feel so anxious yesterday when I walked into that party is because I had spent the whole day alone, and I spent most of the last week alone just because I'm like in a phase in my life where I'm working so much and I'm just don't have much of a social life right now. So I'm just out of practice, but that's really all it is. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share that with you guys, just like an experience that I had that I thought was kind of interesting. And if you're interested in learning more about this kind of meditation, like I said, check out the Sam Harris Waking Up app. He also wrote a really good book. I'll link to that in the description. And yeah, and also if you have any questions about this or anything, feel free to leave them in the comments or DM me on Instagram. And I'd love to talk about it with you guys. All right, peace.